These days, on social media, on history sites dealing with the early Middle Ages in Scotland or Britain, there is a plethora of maps showing Lothian confidently painted out as Anglo-Saxon or Northumbrian. And while there is a truth to this, I think Lothian had a lot in common with early Pict land. So this is the carving up here in the mountain eyrie of Blackford Hill. This is a Pictish era carving of a deer, apparently. And while I was saying that Lothian could claim some kind of resonance with Pict land, clearly it wasn't from their carvings. So, where else should we look for Pictish themes? Craiglockhart next.
Vitrification is a bit of a mystery. It's a process where through intense heat the stones of a stone wall are fused together. Whether this is deliberate or by accident we don't know. If it's deliberate, it's strange because it doesn't make the wall any stronger. An accidental vitrification seems unlikely because of the high temperatures required.
Here, on the top of Craiglockhart, I love this spot. You can see so much. There's Berwick Law, Bass Rock, Arthur's Seat, the castle. Lovely. But what we have here is a vitrified fort. Now, it's been altered somewhat by World War II gun emplacement, which it kind of looks like, you know, the circular bit the gun would swing around. But I think it's originally was like this because it's a vitrified fort. Now, vitrified forts are usually associated with Pictish forts. And I think that while this area was never properly Pictish, it's not without Pictish significance. It's not without Pictish evidence. Not enough to make it Pictish, but enough to make it not entirely un-Pictish.
It's a great natural spot for a hill fort, giving excellent connective vistas of southern Pict land. It's in the style of a hilltop and rampart fort, consistent with the re-emergence in the first millennium AD of these fortifications across Pict land, and it has vitrification. Now, strictly speaking, vitrification is Iron Age and predates the Pictish era. However, examples like Tapo North in Aberdeenshire are firmly placed in what would become a Pictish landscape. Now, Pict-like developments in Lothian might have been an underground movement. We're off to Castle Law. Tucked into the Pentland Hills outside Edinburgh, there is a gem of an ancient site. Castle Law Hill Fort is dated to the Iron Age and affords excellent visibility even on, as you can see, a rain-swept day. Pretty impressive ramparts here on the northern side. Used for centuries and up into the first millennium AD, it has one of the most intriguing features, an earthhouse or souterrain. No one really knows what they were for. but often hill forts themselves can be associated with ancient mysterious ceremonies.
Look at that. I'm here inside the souterrain at Castle Law. Now, souterrains are not exclusively Pictish, just like vitrification at Craiglockhart. They're not exclusively Pictish features, but they are associated with Pictish things. And this is an excellent souterrain. It's in the Pentland Hills. And Pentland is a clue. Pechtland in some local traditions, also perhaps named after Panthoria, a Pictish cat goddess. Now, even if one of those is true, that's a Pictish connection.
And so to Abercorn, where the father of English history can help us with our Pictishness.
Yes, very atmospheric spot.
Here we are, Abercorn Kirk. Looking for Pictish evidence. Well, there's not much extant Pictish evidence, to be quite honest, but there's not none.
And here at Abercorn they have the most wonderful little museum in this little house. So, I think we should go inside. Amazing. Well, these aren't Pictish stones, that's for sure. This one has got interlacing, Northumbrian style. Although, the differences between the Northumbrians and the Picts may not always be as great as we imagine. We've got hogback Viking graves. We've got this Northumbrian cross, a floriated cross with, well, if I'm being mysterious, the Holy Grail. It probably isn't. Communion wine, probably. Well, is that different? Is that different? Is it a different message? Is that actually a different message? Maybe not. So here's the really interesting bit. After the Synod of Whitby in 664, Theodore, Archbishop of Canterbury, appointed Trumwine to be the Bishop of the Picts at Abercorn. After the Battle of Nechans near Forfar in 685, where Brud, the king of the Picts, defeated the Angles, Bede records that Trumwine and his monks fled south to Whitby. However, Trumwine was Bishop of the Picts under English rule. Not that there was in England then, but that's how it was termed. So there were Picts south of the Forth, if you believe Bede. Sometimes we believe Bede and sometimes we don't. But there we are. Historical evidence says there were Picts below the Forth. Here in Lothian. We're in West Lothian. So the evidence says, the historical evidence says, there were Picts here in West Lothian. Picts in Lothian. The Nearly Picts of Lothian. There are different theories as to what that might mean. Were they Britons that the Anglians thought were Picts? Were they Picts? Was it a Pictish culture left over from the days when the Picts overran the Antonine Wall not far from here, all the way down to Hadrian's Wall? What kind of hegemony existed in those days? Do we really know? Was it definitely not Pictish? I'm not sure. Are you?
So let's have a review of just what are the unlikely Pictish traits of Lothian. So we're looking for distinctive features which remind us of Picts, but which we find in Lothian, and find them we did. So what did we get? And we got vitrification at Craiglockhart in Edinburgh. Now, the most famous vitrified fort and which is associated with the Picts, is Tap o' North in Aberdeenshire, a much bigger affair, but undeniably looking over a Pictish landscape, even though Tap o' North is ascribed to the Iron Age, before the Pictish era proper. But these categories are our semantics. Did the Picts actually care whether it was Pictish or Iron Age? I somewhat doubt that. Now, when you're on Craiglockhart, you can't but help to see Pictland, so the Nearly Picts of Lothian were near the Picts, and their sightlines were not down south to Northumberland, their sightlines were across the Forth. The beacon hills of the Lomans, Lomans means luminous, would involve huge fires. There was obviously a huge fire here on Craiglockhart too, because we have vitrification. Hill forts, like on West Lomond, East Lomond, and here at Craiglockhart, have been associated by Noble and Foster and others with the ceremonial. So perhaps with these fires raging on these hilltops, clearly visible on each side of the Forth, perhaps this was a connecting part of a shared psyche. Souterrains are not exclusively Pictish, but Pictish is the usual association, so it's interesting from the point of view of our Nearly Picts that we have one in Lothian. There are famous examples from all over Pictland. Here's a wonderful one at Ballyville on Speyside, which I visited last year in the very heart of Fortrue, the Pictish kingdom of the north. And then we had a bishop of the Picts in Lothian by the authority of Bede. The Venerable Bede, the father of English history, and he's quite categorical. Now, we may decide that he was wrong, but that's a big decision to take for somebody who's the father of English history and was contemporary with the Pictish era, if not a Pict himself. And when I was in Abercorn, I pointed out that the stones there are not Pictish stones. I was right.
Well, these aren't Pictish stones, that's for sure. Northumbrian style. Although, the differences between the Northumbrians and the Picts may not always be as great as we imagine.
But I may have missed a significance. Because there's not only interlacing, as I did point out, but there's also key patterning. Now, neither of these are necessarily Pictish, but they are shared features. Have a look at the key patterning from Abercorn and compare that to the key patterning at the Northern Ecclesiastical Pictish Centre at Port Mahomack. Now, so that's not distinctively Pictish culture, but it is a distinctive culture that the Picts had. So we've got vitrification, a souterrain, historical evidence, and shared stylistic features. All these make Pictishness slightly less unlikely in Lothian. And now some extra considerations. By local folklore, Kirketton was the lair of the Pictish cat goddess Panthoria. Kirketton, of course, the most prominent and visible and distinctive of the Pentland Hills. The Pentland Hills may be named after her, or, in a conflation of ideas, Pentland Hills, sometimes known as the Pechtland Hills, may also mean the Pictland Hills. A similar phenomenon may be involved in the Pentland Firth, just north of the Pictish kingdom of Cat. The distinctive scree marks on the face of Kirketton are said to be made by Panthoria, scratching her claws down the side of the hill. Lothian also shares the tradition of long-kissed burials with Pictland. Another consideration is the poem Ygadodden. One version we have opens its celebration of warriors by naming one Owain. Now, sometimes Owain is assumed to be the son of the king of Reged, Urien, but this Owain comes from Modri, or Murray. So the famous Lothian poem actually gets going with a Pict. Now, looking at Lothian as Northumbrian, when could that have been? Well, Oswald of Northumbria's siege of Edinburgh was, according to the Annals of Ulster, not until 638. Then, less than 50 years later, in 685, the Battle of Nechtinsmuir, or Dunachan, ended Northumbrian hegemony. This was when Bishop Trumwine ran away to Whitby. So that's not only a short gap, but that's when he was ministering in Lothian, according to Bede, the father of English history, to the Picts. So, even in the less than 50 years when Northumbria did have hegemony in Lothian, we have the Northumbrian father of English history, a man contemporary with the Pictish era, telling us that there were Picts there.
So, have we proved that Lothian was Pictish? No, we haven't, because it wasn't. But that was not our aim. Our aim was to show that while it's unlikely that Lothian was Pictish, sometimes the differences between Lothian and Pictland were not as terribly great as we might have imagined.
So there we are. Could it be that Lothian had just a little bit of Pictishness, unlikely as that may seem? Thanks for watching.